He went from working 70 to 80-hour weeks to building a 7-figure agency with 50% profit margins, all while only working about 1 hour per week. Today, he's the founder of GrowthDaily.com and AgencyReviews.io, and he's known by his 45,000 followers on X as Marketing Max. But several years ago, he was an agency co-owner struggling to make the sort of money he wanted to make and enjoy the work in the process. That's when a timely LinkedIn post came across his feed and recommended a book that changed the course of his agency and, as Max explains, his life forever. In today's conversation with Marketing Max, you're going to learn the book that changed the game for his agency, the 2 core principles that he learned, and how to implement them in your own agency, and how he used time tracking and project profitability data to double his agency's growth nearly overnight. To start, let's hear from Max about the fateful night the right resources came across his LinkedIn feed at just the right time.
I was at my friend's place up in New Hampshire for Christmas, and I was in the basement in the bathroom, as weird as that sounds. And I was scrolling LinkedIn and I saw like 5 books. There was like an article of 5 books any agency owner should read, or every agency owner should read. And I scrolled through the first 2 were like basic marketing books that I'd read or basic business books that I'd read. And the third one was this book called Built to Sell. And at the time I was working 70, 80-hour weeks. I had a business partner that was disagreeing with me on a lot of different ways that of how we should take the business and what we should do next. And our goal was to always build the agency to sell. And so I thought, man, that's a pretty cool name, Built to Sell. And the title of the article that was posted on LinkedIn was Books for Agency Owners. So I had to do something with selling an agency. Mm-hmm. And I immediately went on Amazon. And this is back when there was a home button on the iPhone. So I hit home. I remember doing this very, very, very clearly because it literally changed my life. I hit the home button. I opened up Amazon. And I ordered the book, and then when I got back to New York City, where I was living at the time, the book was already there, ready for me when I got back from Christmas at my friend's place in New Hampshire, and I read it in like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And if you know me, I am not a reader. I don't read. I sometimes will listen to audiobooks, but I probably read at like a 3rd grade reading speed, no joke.
I'm a slow reader too. You're in good company
I'm
today.
slow, and like I just get bored. Like I like TV. I like visuals. I like seeing things. I like action. You know.
Yeah.
I have
this one
ADHD
hooked you in, and it was an atypical experience, huh?
I was hooked in. I read it in 3 days, and it's actually a really short book. So I've recommended it to so many people, and almost every agency podcast or interview or in-person talk I do, I recommend this book. But yeah, I think a lot of people that I've recommended it to have read it in an afternoon. It's only like 150 pages, and it's such an easy read. It's written almost like a play. So it's like a story between 2 people that go back and forth. And it totally, totally changed my life and set me on the path to accomplish those agency dreams that I set out to accomplish when I first started my agency. And if it wasn't for that book, I don't think I ever would have gotten there. And if it wasn't for that book, I don't think I ever would have sold my agency and had, the exit that I did. So very grateful to the man that wrote it. Very grateful to the LinkedIn algorithm for showing me that article, and really just grateful to the universe for sharing that with me.
That's such a cool story, man. Well, I know that from your experience and what I've seen of your story in scaling and then eventually exiting that agency is that there was this pricing model that really helped you be able to do what you did to earn more and eventually sell your agency. Talk to me a little bit about maybe just kind of a preview of what was that pricing model, just kind of the quick flyby, because we're going to dig into more how it works and what other agencies can do about that. But give us a little bit of a preview of that, and how does that connect to what you learned from the book, kind of jumping off from the story that you started with?
Yeah, well, the main MO of the book, or the main piece of advice from the book, if you had to summarize it into one sentence, is every single agency should only offer one service at one flat price point to every single client. And the reason for that is because it becomes significantly easier to prospect leads, close leads, becomes significantly easier to hire, becomes significantly easier to scale your business from a finance and cash flow perspective. And so one of the outcomes of that book was going back into the data of time tracking that we've had. So before I read the book, we were tracking our hours, how much time we would spend on each client. And I very quickly realized after the book, when I was digging into the time tracking data of how much time we were spending on each client from each person on the team, that there really wasn't all that much difference in hours spent depending on how much budget we were managing for our clients. So we were a kind of what you'd call today a classic or traditional Facebook and Google Ads agency. Clients would say, hey, we have $25,000 a month to spend, or we have $100,000 a month to spend. And the traditional agency model will charge clients a percentage of ad spend. So if you're spending $100K, and then, in 6 months later, the agency is managing $200,000 a month worth of Facebook ads for you, that retainer is going to go up. And what I realized after digging into the data was we really didn't spend that many more hours on clients that we would manage, $100,000 worth of ad spend for, compared to clients where we were spending, 25, 30K a month for. And that was a really big insight for me. Oftentimes we were actually spending less hours on the bigger clients. And so the insight that I had after reading the book was, man, we can really offer the same flat monthly fee as an agency fee to our clients, regardless of how much money they spend, because it doesn't cost me any more or any less. And while everyone is going into the market saying, hey, we'll start you out at $3K a month retainer or $5K a month retainer, and then, we'll scale you from there, it's a really unique marketing angle and pitch for me to say, hey, all the other agencies you're talking to that you're considering hiring, they're going to start you out at whatever the number is, $3K a month. And then their goal is to get you to spend more, because if you spend more, their fee goes up. We charge the same flat monthly fee regardless of how much money we're spending. So it's in our best interest every single month to keep you as a client based on performance, not to say, oh, it's not working, we need to spend more money on testing, or, oh, this isn't working, we need to ratchet it up and therefore ratchet up the retainer. And so that was such a unique and just fresh breath of air to a lot of brands who were speaking to the same agencies that are more or less charging the same. All you have to do is come in and say one thing that's truly different. Not we have the best strategies, we have the best case studies, we have the best talent. We worked with this amazing client, this big name brand client. That stuff doesn't work. But coming in and saying, hey, like, our model is different from a not just pricing perspective because you're going to save money perspective, but also from it's in our best interest to keep you every month, not based on your spend, but on your performance. That's a breath of fresh air. And our close rate, tracking month over month, how many calls we took with potential clients and then how many clients we actually closed, went through the roof. It at least doubled. I don't have the exact number, but at least doubled simply by introducing that flat monthly fee. So
man, I love that, Max. I love when a guest just answers my next question for me before I even have to ask. I was like, oh, I wonder if you have any data on the close rate going up. But hey, at least double, that is enough to really take to the bank. And you mentioned it being a breath of fresh air for your clients, your prospects that were looking at, various agencies. And I can totally relate to what you were saying there. I remember one of the sales trainings I was at years back when I was in the copier and office equipment industry. And we went around the room and everybody kind of gave their elevator pitch. And it was like, we really care about the customer. We've got great people. And it was like, holy moly. By the time like you heard the exact same pitch 12 times, you were like, wow, this is why our customers and our potential clients, like their eyes glaze over as I'm, giving them the pitch. I imagine it was also a breath of fresh air for you as the agency owner. You mentioned previously working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. What was life like in the agency before you moved to this model, and then kind of things out the other side, especially when it comes to managing the work, managing the clients? We've already spoken to the sales process, but maybe in the client delivery, what were things kind of before and after like for you?
Yeah, so the two biggest takeaways from the book were, number one, the flat monthly fee thing, right? Charging every client the same. And a few more benefits of that based on the question that you just asked would be, I knew that if I wanted to hit a certain revenue number and even profit number, because I knew the average client I would spend X amount of hours on, and I kind of knew what my average cost per hour spent on my salary was. I knew, I only had to get 6 more clients in order to hit the goal I wanted, or I had to get 3 more clients to be able to hire that next person. And for a lot of agency owners who have some clients at $2K a month and some clients at $7K a month, it's really hard to do forecasting. So that made it significantly easier. But to the second point of working 70, 80-hour work weeks, the other takeaway from the book was it was offering one service, period, end of story. every agency owner tries to upsell and cross-sell and bring in other services. And, I was listening to a podcast yesterday with an agency guru actually. He makes like $10 million a year teaching agency owners how to, better grow their business and whatever. We've all seen those guys and gals. And it was hilarious. He's like, you got to offer so many more services. Like, if you're the email marketing provider and the Facebook ads provider and you're doing their SEO, like it's going to be so much harder to leave you. And I just could not disagree with that more, because you can't do everything well. At the end of the day, people are only going to stay with you if you are driving performance for them. And so you can't deliver amazing emails and amazing Facebook ads and amazing SEO and amazing CRO. You just can't do that unless you're charging 40, 50K a month. And even if you are doing that, it's extremely, extremely difficult. So the thing that really was the catalyst for going from 70, 80-hour work weeks down to, eventually 1 day a week, I would only take calls on Tuesday and maybe answer, an hour's worth of Slack or emails the rest of the week, was going from 17 different services down to more or less 1 or 2. So we, after reading the book, we went into conference room B. I'll never forget this, in our co-working space in Manhattan. We went into conference room B, and we made a list of all of the different services that we were currently offering to our clients. At the time, we had 20 clients, and we were doing 17 different services. Everything from...
It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio there.
Almost a 1-to-1, which is crazy. But I mean, most of them we were doing 2 or 3 for at the very least.
Okay.
But like oftentimes, at the early days, we were working with startups, because my background was in venture capital and startup accelerators. And so, we were doing logo design and brand design refreshes. We were doing pitch deck creation. We were doing financial modeling even for some of the clients, because I had a financial background in investment banking and venture capital. And so I would kind of get clients in the door through doing like simple valuations to help them raise their next round. But then we would do their Facebook ads, because they needed data on what their cost to acquire a customer was and what their LTV was. So we would kind of handle all of this for them. And we made a list of all the 17. And this was like, I don't talk about this too much, but this was the thing that really was the catalyst for moving down to 1 or 2 services. Was we made a list of all 17, right? In this big conference room B was the biggest conference room there. And we made 2 columns, and we numbered them 1 to 17. Number 1, what was the most profitable, right? What could we charge the most for, but spend the least amount of time on? And then number 2, what was the most valuable to our clients? Because if it was the most valuable to our clients, they would stick around, right? It's not a logo design, or it's like, they're going to stick around. And when we look at the full list, the number 1 thing that was the highest profitable and the most impactful was Google Ads. So for a very split moment there, we were like, should we just be a Google Ads only agency? Like this is our calling. Like we're going to be a Google Ads only agency. And then we said, well, let's look at the rest of the list. And then the only other thing that had the same number on both columns was Facebook ads. And we kind of realized like Facebook ads and Google ads kind of go hand in hand. You can drive really quality traffic with Google ads, and you can retarget with really high quality Facebook ads, delivering that middle of the funnel kind of marketing collateral or message. And so we walked out of that conference room as an agency that was a Facebook and Google ads agency. And we actually, this is a hilarious story. I'm guessing you've watched Mad Men, given you are the host of Agency Life podcast, right?
Right.
So if you remember the episode in Mad Men where Don Draper writes a letter to tobacco, and he publishes it in the back of, I think it was the New York Times, and he's like, here's why I'm quitting tobacco. And it was right after a major tobacco brand, which was like their biggest account, fired them. And back then, right, you had to have like a tobacco brand. You had to have a tobacco client in order to be a big agency, and they were going to lose like half their billings. And he was basically like, screw this. Like, I'm quitting tobacco. It's bad for you. And like our agency doesn't want it. And if you're a tobacco brand, here's a list of 4 other agencies that do that. So I found a clip of that scene on YouTube, and in the scene, it's an amazing scene. And if I'm rambling, tell me to shut up. But
no, this is a great story. I'm totally tracking with you.
In the scene, he's like swimming, and then he's like writing down on his paper. It's very like emotional, and like it's very like kind of dramatic. And then you can hear his voiceover, Don Draper's voice, John Hamm, who's now the voice of Mercedes-Benz commercials, side note. But yeah, you can hear him writing the letter. And it's like this amazing moment where he's having this transformational life experience and career experience, and everything's going fantastic. And he's kind of going against the grain. So I played it back like 5 or 6 times, and I typed it out word for word.
Okay.
And then I Googled like the formatting of it, because at the very end in the YouTube clip, it was kind of blurred out, but I found like a really clear copy of it. And I almost copied that letter word for word, but announcing that we were transitioning from a full service marketing agency to a Facebook and Google Ads agency. And I even wrote at the bottom, like, if you want branding work, here's a list of agencies that we recommend. Right. And I kind of had like, I kind of had to do this big thing, not only to the world, to let the world know that, you know, we were going to transition, but more to keep ourselves accountable. Because it's so easy when you're an agency owner, right? And I know a lot of people listening to this are going to feel this way. It's so easy when you're an agency owner and someone asks, hey, can you also do my email marketing? It's like, well, what would you spend for that? Well, we're currently paying our agency $3,000 a month and we don't love them. Like, yeah, I'll do your email marketing for $3,000 a month. You have no freaking clue. You've never opened up Klaviyo or ActiveCampaign, but you're going to figure it out because it's an extra $3,000, right?
Right.
That is so easy. But what we found is that's the detriment. Right. That's where you fall into the agency trap of just always trying to take on more money for whatever it is that you can figure out how to do. That's not building a real scalable business that is quote unquote built to sell. And so we sent out this email to everyone, and I think I got like 20 responses back in an hour. And one was like, this is dumb. Like, this is very stupid. You guys are dumb. But the other 19 were basically like, hey, like, love it. I want Facebook ads help. Or, you know, I have a friend that wants Facebook ads help. Or I have a friend that, you know, has a Google ads agency and like they're struggling and they're trying to fold. Like, are you interested in buying them? Was one of the questions we got. So
90% plus positive reply rate from your, you know, few dozen customers for one. 2, you got new leads. 3, you got the opportunity with some M&A potentially with another agency out of just sending out this email. That's fantastic. Did you post it anywhere? Like, was this a tweet thread or anything else, or was it just the email to the client base?
This must have been 2017, 2018, well before Marketing Max was on Twitter. I posted it on my LinkedIn. I could probably go back and find it.
I might help you go dig that out, and we'll put it in the show notes if we can find it in the description of this episode, man.
It was happy to do that, but it was a MailChimp. Back then, I exported all my Gmail contacts and my business partners' Gmail contacts and all of our clients, and I put us into a MailChimp. I put all those emails into a MailChimp, and I sent it out. I think it was only like 900 people back then. But yeah, I ended up printing that out, and then I printed out the John Hamm or the Don Draper one from the show, and I put it right above my desk, and I was like, I'm going to hold myself accountable to this. We're only doing these 2 things.
Good move.
And it was right after I read the book, and so it was like, okay, well, what are we going to charge per month? And I think like the next 4 or 5 clients, we got them in at like $2,500 a month, just because we wanted that recurring revenue and we wanted to prove out the case study. And very quickly, that number grew to $3,500 a month, and that number grew to $5,000 a month, and then eventually, you know, $7,000, $8,000 a month. And we had some clients who were spending $20,000 a month on ad spend, and we had other clients who were spending $150,000, $200,000 a month on ad spend. Doesn't matter. Our profit margins, more or less, on $5,000 a month retainer was $2,500.
Yeah.
So, like, again, for forecasting and for growth and for everything else, I knew that every client on average would stay 9 to 12 months. And I knew that my profit margin across the board for 20 plus clients at any given time was $2,500. So I knew the value of a client, you know, was upwards of 25, 30 grand. And so that also made it easier for me to start investing in my own Facebook ads and my own Google ads and everything else. But,
yeah. So the ripple effects definitely were many. We were only touching on a few of those first little ripples after you made a splash with that email, which I love that story. Max, tell me a little bit about, so you mentioned kind of doing this exercise of what was most profitable and what's most impactful, because I love those two together, right? If you find what's most profitable, but it's not actually valuable, then you're not going to drive results for clients and you're not going to keep them. But if you do what's most impactful, but you can't do it profitably, then that's another route to ruin as an agency. The other aspect of that is then, as you mentioned here a couple times, deciding to go with this route recommended in the book, Built to Sell, to have a flat monthly cost no matter, what the ad spend was. And it sounds like time tracking was a big part of that, which, just makes me smile. Here at teamwork.com, we know that our agencies that run on our platform to deliver client work, time tracking really unlocks so many things, that being able to look at capacity management, utilization rates, financial reporting, like their profitability per project and per client. So talk to me a little bit about what that investigation was like, and I guess maybe some of the things that were surprising to you that you were like, hold on, we could actually do this because of the data that's surfacing now that I actually look at it.
Yeah, well, one of my mentors runs a very small law firm.
Okay.
And when I came to him and said, my business partner and I, John and I, are spending like 80 hours every week working, and we never leave the office. And at the time, we were young and we were single and we were living in New York City, so we didn't care. We were building our business, we were building our version of Apple. It's going to, sell for $100 bajillion and everything. We didn't care so much, but after a while, it kind of started to take a toll on both of our personal health. And I went to the mentor and I was like, hey, what the heck? And he said, well, do you track your hours? And I said, no, I'm not a law firm. I don't bill per hour. We charge the same flat monthly fee. Or that was before we charged the same flat monthly fee. I said, we kind of agree to a set price, and every client pays us a different number.
A flexible monthly retainer, still same thing. We don't bill by the hour, right?
Exactly. And he said, well, how much money are you paying yourself, you and John? And I told him, very little, like close to nothing, right? And he said, well, how much money do you want to make? And I said, it would be nice, given the amount of work we do and the value that we bring, it'd be nice to make $100,000 a year. Like that, that's fairly realistic. And he said, great, we'll figure out what your hourly cost is for, let's say, even a 50 or 60 hour work week. Mm-hmm. And then figure out what your hourly rate is, and then start tracking your hours for a month and see, okay, if you were to times it by however many hours you're working per client, are you losing money or making money per client? Mm-hmm. And we did that for 1 month, and the data was just amazing. We were losing money. I think at that point we had, plus or minus 20 clients, and I think we were losing money on like 14 or 15 out of that, like losing a lot of money if we were at the $100,000 a year salary mark. Mm-hmm. And it became very clear that, we need to, number one, raise our rates, and number two, we need to stop working on things that we're not getting paid for. And that was a big reason why we ended up having 17 different services. Oftentimes they'd be like, hey, can you take a look at our SEO? And we'd say, yeah, we'll do it for free for a month, and like if it works, great. But when you do that for all these startups that don't have a big budget, they're taking advantage of you. And we were young, we were early day entrepreneurs, and we didn't really have the guts to say no. And we also thought, if we do it for free for a month, we'll end up making $1,000 extra every month after that. And it just never ended up working out that way. And it was the hourly data per client and per project for each client that really unlocked that insight for us that, number one, we need to raise our rates. Number two, we need to stop doing things that we're not getting paid for. And then that was, a few months before I read Built to Sell. And then when Built to Sell came, it was like, oh man, this is it. And again, it was the hourly data that was the signal that encouraged us to really implement the Built to Sell model. As I was saying before, I've had at least 40 or 50 different people that I've recommended the book to follow up with me afterwards and say, wow, this is amazing. And then I check in with them 6 months later and they don't actually do it. They don't actually follow it. And I don't know if it was just how desperate we were in the moment, or how like the hourly data, that's where I'm going with this, like where the hourly data was the signal that allowed us to really implement this and recognize like this is actually not hurting us, this is helping us. Mm-hmm. But once we got really disciplined about it, that's when our business started to take off. And there's if you look in QuickBooks on like the chart of my agency's growth, like there's maybe 4 growth spurts where within like a 3-month period we doubled. Mm-hmm. And then we hit a plateau, and then we doubled, and we hit a plateau. And the first one was after reading Built to Sell, implementing the flat monthly fee and going down to Facebook and Google ads only. And it was the data in the hours that really made us confident that, we can do this, and we can do this well, we can do it profitably, we're going to deliver a ton of value to our clients, and everything else. And then from there, on an ongoing basis, every month we would export all the data, and we would put it into a Google sheet of how many hours we worked for that client. And I would look at, what my total I basically take my total payroll every single month. This is a good hack for agency owners. If you're not, first of all, if you're not tracking your time, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be mean, but like it is number by far and away, even if you don't charge a flat monthly fee, even if you work on commission, it's going to uncover so much data. So number one, you have to track your hours. Number two, we would put it into a Google Sheet, and then every month I would see exactly to the penny what my salary costs were, what my total payroll costs were in Rippling. We use Rippling. And I would divide that number of our salary cost by how many hours we worked to figure out what our average blended cost per hour was, no matter who the team member was, if they were overseas or if they were stateside.
Okay.
And then from there, I would plug that average number into our calculation in Google Sheet to see how much money we spent servicing each client every month. And then what we would do is that if after 3 months we were negative, we'd go back to that client and say, hey, like, we're loving this relationship, but we either need to charge you more, or, we have to go down to 1 call a month instead of, 1 call every other week, or, we have to adjust this somehow, or we're happy to introduce you to another agency that would charge you less. But like,
what a trust builder to go to that client and say, we'll introduce you to another agency who could, service you for what budget you have and deliver.
Yeah. And after the first email that we sent out, the Mad Men email.
Yeah, the Mad Men email.
That one, we introduced, I think, 10 of our clients to other agencies. And that wasn't even for Facebook and Google Ads. That was like, hey, like, you guys clearly need branding help.
Yeah.
We'd like to introduce you to 3 other agencies who are doing branding work, because we're basically just really creative guys that are using Canva, to be totally honest. But like, we only had to have that conversation with maybe like 3 or 4 clients out of 120 in total that we worked with in the 5 years of our agency. And I'm trying to think, out of those 4 or 5, I think we only made introductions to like 1 client, right? Other introductions to other agencies for 1 client. But to your point, it was a trust building exercise. And the truth is, when we started hiring really good overseas talent, we almost never had that issue, right? Our hourly rate was so much less than what it was when the first 4 of us were stateside. But again, only able to say that now because we tracked our hours. Like, it was the data in your business or it was the data in our business that allowed us to make all these decisions and scale. And I don't know if we would have been able to get to where we got without tracking our hours.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying that because you guys are teamwork, but like, genuinely.
Right. And, as you were kind of thinking there a little bit of like, why was I able to make that transition? Like, who's really to know? But the stars really did seem to align for you there in some form or fashion of kind of uncovering, getting this nod or this kind of prod from your mentor to track your time, man. And then, reading the book and looking at those things. Something you mentioned there as you were talking, Max, was about recommending the book, following up with other agency owners who read it, who kind of had the same revelation of this is what's possible, just like you did from the first time of reading that book after the Christmas trip that you mentioned at the Open. What were some of the challenges for you, or what are some of the perceived challenges maybe that the other agency owners that you talk to that even read the book, look at your success, and then say, no, I can't do that?
It's just one word, and it's just discipline. It's purely discipline. I like to think I practice what I preach, but one of the things that I don't do very well is actually niching down. So like, if I was to take the book a step further, I would say we offer Facebook and Google Ads services for flat $5,000 a month only for e-com brands, or only for SaaS brands, or only for whatever. Like, I don't practice that as much as I preach. But with that said, I had enough discipline back then to know that siloing down to 1 core service, Facebook and Google Ads technically might be 2, but it's really kind of like digital.
Well, you guys kind of bundled it, right? Of like, hey, here's how your paid digital ads could work in solving this sort of problem. So you niche down to the problem that you solved with those 2 channels combined. I think that's a fair way to assess it.
I appreciate that. That's going to help me sleep better tonight. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, send me a therapy bill. But because in my mind it's like, man, like, what else could have I done to get even further, or to grow even faster, or to get even bigger? And oftentimes I think about, niching down more, or just going down to Facebook ads, or just going down to Google ads. But yeah, to answer your question about, what are the fallacies, it just comes down to discipline. It's the same reason why I don't love niching down in the projects that I have now, and why I didn't niche down before. It's like I'm missing money, I'm missing revenue, I'm missing income, and that is the hardest thing for agency owners. I like to say most agencies actually aren't businesses; they're glorified jobs. Most agencies that have 3 or 4 people, you're making slightly more than you would make if you worked somewhere else, but you have complete flexibility and freedom to hire whoever you want and to work with whoever you want. You just happen to know how to send invoices on QuickBooks and follow up with people. And before, you had a team doing that at your company, right? So it's really important to recognize that, like, if you're just in it to make money and you want a good lifestyle and you want to make 200 to 400,000 bucks a year, then great. Do multiple services and hire whoever you want and don't track your hours. But if you want to build a real business that is truly built to sell and truly is something that can work without you, that's what a business is, right? Like, you step away and the business services the clients. The business operates, right? Yes, you might be there to run a meeting, or you might need to be there to make a decision, or you need to still interview people. But net, at the end of the day, the business is servicing the revenue, and the business can run without one single person. That's a business, right? And so the fallacy that a lot of people who read the book run into, and why I think a lot of people read it and never end up actually doing it, or frankly, people who listen to a podcast like this where I share a story. This is maybe the second or third podcast I've been on where I share this story. People listen, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. They DM me on Twitter all the time. I still get DMs from Twitter on a podcast I did sharing a similar story last year. Oh my God, I'm going to niche down. I'm going to read the book. Thank you so much. And I follow up with them and they don't do it. It just all comes back to discipline. It's like, yes, you're leaving money on the table. Yes, you're missing out on, to use that example before, the $3,000 a month that you could be making if you did email. But people don't equate the trade-off to dollars. So you're giving up $3,000, but you're giving up $3,000, but you're gaining the data, you're gaining the insights, you're gaining the increased conversion rate, right? You're gaining the ability to hire easier, right? A great example of that is Southwest Airlines. All of their planes are the same model plane. Did you know this?
I didn't know this, and I fly Southwest a ton.
All of their planes are the same model planes. Why are they the same model plane? Because every time they go to hire an engineer, all they need to do is make sure that that engineer knows how to service every single part of that one plane.
Yeah.
And every time they hired a stewardess, they need to only train that stewardess in the door removal and the buttons and everything of that particular one plane. It makes hiring a million times easier. That's what niching down to one service does, right? Before, when we were offering email marketing, we were offering SEO, we didn't know if the next person we need to hire, even if we had budget, should have been an SEO person, an email person, should have been a jack of all trades. But by only offering Facebook and Google ads, now all I know is every single time we have enough budget to hire someone, we need to go hire someone that's an expert in Facebook and Google ads. Period.
I love that analogy.
Like
that great story with the turning the Mad Men episode into an email. And now we've got a great analogy between Southwest and running an agency, and something you touched on there. So Max, we've obviously talked about the importance of time tracking and looking at your hours that unlocked the data that gave you the insights to actually make this model work. Talked about looking kind of the steps that you shared earlier. I didn't write it down, maybe 4 or 5 steps, but pretty simple in monthly doing that reconciliation that eventually got you to the average blended hourly rate across the agency. I think those are 2 great things. Kind of hidden in there, you mentioned like when you had the right talent doing the right thing, kind of like you looked at the service, like the most profitable and the most impactful. How you hire and how you place the talent to do the right things within the agency is another key component of this. For anybody who missed it a few weeks back, we had Eric Sue on, founder of Single Grain, or
Love
CEO
Eric.
of Single Grain, and he dropped several different things in his episode on his hiring secrets that have helped him build an agency. If you didn't get that, check it out in the description here. But he was mentioning strategic talent versus creative or delivery talent, being very thoughtful about who and where you hire from those different roles within the agency. So I think all of those can help people go down a similar path. Were there any other systems or processes, Max, that you would say, hey, if you are thinking about taking steps to follow a similar path, that folks should be thinking about, or first things that they might do to implement something and make this change within their agency?
That's a great question. Step one is reading Built to Sell.
Just read the book.
Just read the damn book. It is so good and so easy to read. Again, I don't like reading, but I was captivated. It was just so freaking valuable, and it explains everything so well, no matter the type of agency, not just performance. If you're a creative agency, same thing.
Oh, I was going to ask you that earlier. Like, do you think that any sort of agency like that this can, because you're talking about a paid ads agency, but what if you're a PR agency? What if you're a RevOps agency? Like all these different sorts. What if you do more custom development or web design or branding? Do you think this applies equally to pretty much any type of agency?
So the book, the entire example and story from the book is actually with a branding agency.
Okay.
Nothing to do with paid media, nothing to do with performance ads or anything at all. So this works, I would say, almost better with performance or with creative agencies and PR agencies. And the whole book is built on a project basis, not even a monthly recurring basis. So I did have to do a little thinking and see how can we apply this project to project strategy, mechanism, infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, business model, we'll call it. I had to figure out how to install this project-based business model that they talk about in the book to a monthly subscription business. And, you know, after spending 10 minutes with a notepad and my phone on airplane mode, it was pretty easy to come up with, okay, flat monthly fee to every single client, very similar to what the book talks about, which is every single client pays the same thing for the same project, right? But, you know, I think most smaller agencies that work with, I would say smaller to mid-sized brands, this is by far and away the way to build your agency if you want to sell it. And I can't tell you how many times I go on podcasts or on Twitter, I tweet out, or I'm at a conference. I spoke at a conference in October specifically for agency owners. I'll never forget this gentleman in his 50s walks up to me and he says, I run a video marketing agency and I really want to sell my agency because I want to retire. How do I do that? And I immediately asked him, well, how many people work at your agency? He said, we had 3 contractors. I said, well, is there any world where you can step away from the business and the business will still work? And he said, no. Then I said, final question, you know, what is your average revenue per project? And he said, man, it's somewhere between like 5 to 50 grand. And I said, there's your problem right there. You know, like you want to sell your business. Who's going to buy a business that doesn't have any sort of predictability, that requires you to be in the business all the time, and most importantly, that doesn't have a process or system that they can just tap into to scale? And he was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I told him to read the book, and he read the book, and I don't think he's made any changes since, like at all. You know, and I'm not going to say his name here. I don't want to call him out, but it's just the same thing over and over and over again. And I think most agency owners fall into this trap where they run a lifestyle business. You know, they make $200K to $400K a year. They can pay their mortgage, they can pay their rent, they can pay for their kids' school. They have complete flexibility over their boss or over their time. You know, they don't have a boss.
Right.
And so in their minds, they're running a business, but in reality, they're really having a glorified job. There's no systems, there's no process, there's no ability to step away and sell the business. And that's another thing, another advantage of the built to sell model, and just being able to really niche down, silo down, and remove yourself from the business is when I went to sell my agency, which is a whole other podcast I'm sure we could talk about for hours.
Yeah.
And hours. But when I
Part
went to
2
sell
with Marketing Max coming up in a few weeks, everybody. Go for it.
I'm game. But when I went to sell my agency, I spoke to like 6 or 7 different potential buyers. And every single buyer, table stakes, was you have to stay in the business for at least 2 to 3 years. Like you as CEO, stay in the business for 2 to 3 years. And as I started to explain to a lot of them, hey, you don't need me. I only work on Tuesdays and I only take sales calls. So plug in a salesperson, you're good. They were like, oh, that's really interesting. And I ended up being able to sell my agency where literally the day after I sold my agency, I had a 6-month transition services agreement where all I had to do was dedicate 10 hours a week to the agency. And that's it for 6 months. Basically a day or a day and a half of my time every week for 6 months. Then I left, totally gone. And I get a check every quarter in the mail for 4 years. If I had to stick around for 6 months, but I get paid out for 4 years on top of the cash bonus. That's not possible unless you do something like this built to sell model. It's just not. And people always think, oh, more money from email, more money by adding SEO, more money by, repurposing content that we create into clips and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Are you building something that's scalable? Are you
Yeah.
building something that can scale to 50 clients, 60 clients? The caveat to all of this is one of my best friends runs an agency in Los Angeles that works with mega, mega, mega brands like Nike and Travelocity and like Fortune 500 household name brands. I gave him the book, and like I think it's really hard for an agency like that works on a project to project basis to transition into something like this. It's totally possible, but they've carved out a name for themselves and a reputation for themselves by working creatively on a project to project basis. So they're almost more like a movie studio where like a writer comes to a movie studio and says like, I have this great script, and the studio's like, okay, we're going to, put some money behind it and let's go execute this particular thing. Nike or Travelocity or any one of these companies will come to them and they'll say, we want to do this campaign, and then they'll match it. And we've spent some time at a coffee shop on a number of occasions trying to think through like how to productize that. But in that world, it's really hard to productize that service, that offering, because it's different for every single customer. And, he has built up enough of a reputation in his business to be able to consistently get business and deliver value on that and build somewhat of a sustainable business. That's the only caveat, I think, is if you work in such a highly customized, special way. But even then, like I know of an agency, and I won't say the name of it, but I know of this agency. They do probably $7 million a year in top line with 3 or 4 full-time people. And they charge a flat $150,000 for a 1-week engagement. And it's the same engagement to every single client. So you can do the math, how many projects they're doing a year. They fly to meet the clients where they are, and it's the same flat $150K. It's the exact same deliverables. It's a deck with the exact same deliverables every single time. And that is the only way to really productize those higher level things. And when someone says like, hey, can you tweak it this way? Can you tweak it that way? No.
That is the discipline. I almost wanted to ask you that because I was part of an agency where we sold a very productized service around podcast production, and I struggled with that. And frankly, I can't stand here and say that I took that hard line and said no, because we had very defined packages, but then we'd get these requests of, well, could you do this? And it was funny when you were saying, can we repurpose this into clips for social? I was like, that's exactly the conversation I had 2-3 years ago with clients when people were just starting to do that more out of podcasts. And I think it does come back down to that discipline. Another example that comes to mind, I don't know exactly their entire business, but shout out to Guy and his team at Amalt. They are a B2B video ad agency that we worked with to launch our video recently called The Client. We'll link to that. If you haven't seen that hilarious video, check it out in the episode description here. But we engaged with them because we saw that they did a really cool kind of movie trailer spoof to do kind of atypical, non-boring B2B video. And guess what? We hired them, and we did a video ad with them, and it was kind of that same MO, very creative, right? And I imagine the process of storyboarding it, getting actors, filming it, delivering it, coaching us on how to use that ad effectively was very repeatable, even though there's tons of creativity within that. So just wanted to give a shout out to Guy and point out Amalt as another agency who is doing very creative stuff, but following at least some of the advice. Again, I don't know their whole business model if they do some other things, but they definitely came to mind when you were talking about this is possible for other types of agencies.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of something that's not a Facebook or Google Ads agency, right? Not a performance ad agency that is still productized, right? Because you can say we create really unique, outside the box, creative videos that are under 5 minutes. It's $5,000. But we run you through our process to figure out what is creative and outside the box for your industry against your competitors that's unique to your business. And therefore, the fulfillment is the same. So step 1, we meet with you and we put you through a 2-hour kickoff workshop where we ask you a bunch of questions. Step 2, we pitch you 3 ideas. Step 4, once you approve the ideas, we pick the actors. That is a repeatable process that, again, someone can either buy your business, or you can even leave your business and hire a replacement CEO where they just follow that. And then you know, from a hiring perspective, okay, we need to hire people who are really good at finding and negotiating with talent, or we need to find someone who's really good at coming up with outside the box ideas, right? Or we need to come up with whatever those things are. When you have the same process and system for every single client, everything becomes easy. And all of the benefits that we've talked about over the last however long we've been on the call has been just accentuated and become so much easier for both you and the clients. The other advantage of this, and again, forgive me if I'm rambling, the other advantage of this that you talked about when you talked about the agency that you just hired was the case studies. So if you offer 3 different services, I almost guarantee you one of those services is hotter than the other one, right? You make more of your money from one. So when someone comes to you really wanting the third one, not the first one that most people want, but if someone's like, oh, I actually really want that, you're not going to have nearly as much case studies or as many case studies because most of your clients are in the other thing. So by going to the market and saying we create really outside the box videos that are under 5 minutes for B2B businesses, and it's $5,000, we put you through our 3-step process to do that. Or by going to the market and saying we run Facebook and Google ads for a flat $5,000 a month, regardless of how much money you spend, and we're going to do your creative and your media buying. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Where are your case studies? And now it's like, here's 40 examples of us doing this exceptionally well for other people.
That is a great call out, man, because it actually, without you even knowing this, you called out very similarly to how we ended up hiring Amalt as an agency to do the client video for us. It was because members of our marketing leadership and our brand team actually saw one of their videos and they started sharing it. And then, we not only did it engage us because we happen to be the target audience for that video they did for another brand, but then we were like, we want you to do that for us. And guess how easy of a sell that was, right? We've already seen it. We've already been impacted, seen the results in being the audience for that. And so that's an example of like that quote unquote case study, just finding us, right? And pre-selling us before we ever went to Guy and said, hey, we want to hire you guys to maybe do some video. What should we do? What approach should we take? No, we were just like, hey, we want you to do this. Like, now let's figure out the details and the pricing and stuff like that. So that is a great place to round it out. And your advice there was actually just, very synonymous with our own experience as a marketing team hiring an agency recently. And again, shout out to Guy and the team over at Amalt. All right. Well, Marketing Max, we are going to finish with our final 2 segments like we always do here on Agency Life, our Fast 5 and our Good Shout. You ready for the rapid fire, my friend?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, let's say you were still running your agency and someone just granted you an extra $10,000 a month, and you can think of maybe a particular point in growing your agency, but you had that additional budget. Where do you think you would have spent that if it was just like, hey, here's some extra budget room, no strings attached?
My gut says Google Ads.
In marketing your own agency, as you were saying earlier.
Google Ads was one of those kind of inflection points where, I kind of doubled in 3 months after I started doing Google Ads the right way. But I really think I would, here's my answer. Here's my official answer. Apologies. I know this is supposed to be rapid fire. I'll shut up after this, but here's my answer. Take $16 out of the $10,000 and go read the book. And then take the other 9,900 and whatever and hire someone to keep you accountable to do it. That's how I would spend the time.
That is maybe the best answer to this question that ties into actually the advice of the episode as best. So even if it's not as rapid fire, I think that still works. You've already answered number 2. What are some of your all-time favorite business books? I think we just leave it at Built to Sell, and leave it. Again, that will be in the show notes in the episode description if you're listening to this and you want to take Max's advice. All right, number 3, Max, this is my favorite of our Fast 5. What's one mistake you made in running your agency that you'll never forget?
Can we call my therapist real quick? One mistake that I made in my agency that I'll never forget. I think it was prioritizing money over sanity. Sticking with clients that drove me absolutely bonkers and that would call me at 3 a.m, even though they were only paying me $1,000 a month. Just choosing money over sanity.
Yeah. For anybody who hasn't seen the client video that we mentioned earlier, and you've had similar experiences to those late night calls, you might just relate to that. So check it out after
I
we
need to
finish
go
up with
watch
Max
that.
today.
I'm
All
curious.
right, Max, 4 and 5 are two sides to the same coin. What's the hardest part about agency life, and what do you think is the best part about agency life?
I'll answer the second one first. The best part is the freedom. It really is the best lifestyle business you could possibly ever buy or ever run and start. If you want to make, like I said, 200 to 400K a year or more, but if you want to make 200 to 400K a year, not working all that much with not all that much stress, there's such a clear blueprint and strategy, and there's books, as we've talked about, and YouTube videos and everything that you can watch to kind of emulate to create an amazing lifestyle business for you. The worst part about agency life, clients. I mean, like I complained about clients a lot when I was running my agency internally, obviously never to clients' faces. And I was like, man, I can't wait to sell my agency so I can go on to other types of business models.
Yeah.
And I can, not have to deal with clients. Then you kind of realize like that is the dumbest thing in the entire world, because every single business has clients. They just are called different, right? If you're a SaaS business,
Yeah.
if you're Slack, if you're Canva, if you're Uber, you have
Yeah.
users. There's still clients. There's still shit that they, excuse my French, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this, but there's still stuff that they have issues with that they're going to think is something that you should be doing right, or when you make a mistake, it still stresses you out. They just might be called users. They might be called customers if you're an e-commerce brand or whatever. So, it's clients, but net at the end of the day, like any business has that. I just think with agencies, particularly in performance agencies, the friction can be really, really, really challenging and difficult and stressful. So clients.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Max, last question for you before we let people know how to find you, how to sign up for the Growth Daily newsletter, those sorts of things. Who's one person you want to give a shout out to who's positively impacted your career in and through agency life?
My immediate initial reaction is just my wife.
There you go.
She met me right at kind of an inflection point in my agency and really helped me understand the worst part of agency life, as we were just talking about, the money for the sanity stuff.
Yeah.
And helped me stay disciplined in the one service, one flat fee. Because the truth is, like, it's just shiny object syndrome at the end of the day. Like, agencies are the ultimate shiny object syndrome. And so branching into a new market or trying a new service, it's so easy to start that, but you don't realize really what you're giving up. And my wife really has helped me see the clarity through that time and time and time again. So yeah, I owe her everything.
That's a great place to round it out, man, because we started out the conversation kind of telling the story of how you built and sold a 7-figure agency. You had high profit margins. You didn't make the mistake of stepping over the dollar to pick up a penny, which I think is really what's happening with the shiny object syndrome. And to you, it ended up in, what they say sometimes, that quote unquote mailbox money, right? In selling your agency. But it's not just all about the money. You were able to accomplish something that has allowed you to move on to other things, to follow and pursue your passions, to be able to, it wasn't just about, pursuing the almighty dollar at the cost of everything else. It was a way in doing it that was sustainable, that was fulfilling, and all those sorts of things. So I think that wraps it up very, very well. For anyone who's not yet following Marketing Max on Twitter or signed up for your newsletter, what's the easiest ways for them to stay in touch and get more content from you, Max?
Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter. I spend, I audited this last week. I think I spend like 3 to 5 hours a
Tracking
day
those
on
hours
Twitter.
still, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
But yeah, I spent 3 to 5 hours a day on Twitter. Although the outcome of that was I now limit my Twitter phone time to 30 minutes a day.
There you go.
Bad, and I lock it on the weekend, so that number's about to drastically go down. But Twitter at Marketing Max is the easiest place to find me. And then I write a newsletter that goes out to 100,000 people every single day. You can sign up for that at growthdaily.com. And if you have any questions, thoughts, you want feedback on anything, you have questions about how I implemented anything that we chatted about today, I'm more than happy to answer the questions on Twitter. Literally just DM me and I will respond pretty quickly.
I love it. Well, Max, thank you so much for being our guest today. Tons of things to learn from the book, which again, we'll link to the description as well as those other episodes we mentioned and the client video. Go check that out. It's like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sure it will make you smile today. And make sure that you go give Marketing Max a follow on Twitter, sign up for the newsletter. And thank you as always for listening to Agency Life.
Thanks for having me.